Welcome, folks, and thanks for tuning in. This is a video response to Conscious TV's interview with Rupert Spira, who I recognize as an extraordinary Advaita teacher. We're quite fortunate to have his insightful commentary. Those of us who are practicing meditation in our various disciplines and our various modalities, I'm a Zen Buddhist myself, have found that Rupert's extraordinary philosophical and reasonable approach to to liberation and to the awakened state is extraordinarily helpful and again insightful and very significant to mental health also, which is what our conversation is about today. By the way, Rupert Spira's book is The Transparency of Things, an extraordinary book. If you are practicing meditation and concerned about the placement of your attention, do read the book. I recommend it very strongly. I think if you are also a teacher of meditation, do indeed read the book. It will help you to communicate very difficult issues to discuss with students, and that is emptiness, consciousness, subjectivity, objectivity, and where we place our attention in the meditative process. That question of where we place our attention in the meditative process is what my current commentary is about in terms of mental health. And I'd like to just talk about suffering in terms of memory, self-conception, and worldview, which is really the source of suffering. The source of suffering is our understanding of the world, and I don't. I mean to say that it does not suffering. I'm not categorizing pain, for example, as human suffering. It is really the editorial that comes after pain, the worldview and the self-concept that continues our doubt and our fear of being alive and also of death itself. So just to discuss the theory of human suffering, we do not see life as such, as it is, and if we did, we actually would not suffer. So I'll open up with that statement. How do we see it? We see it through symbols, utilitarian symbols, symbols that help us to function. We see life through schemas. Schemas are representations of reality. They are indeed symbols. They are functional and utilitarian. So, for example, when you look at your hand, you do not actually see the hand as such, but you see the symbol of the hand, its functional symbol, and we're quite satisfied with that. Same thing seeing a chair. We look at the chair and we have the image of a chair already in our mind, and we project it onto the chair, and we then do not need to evaluate the chair to see how it's functioning. We already have that representation in our mind. Well, we've pretty much conceptualized our entire world, and we are not looking, we're not investigating and analyzing what we are perceiving because we don't think we need to. And in fact, of course, we don't to some extent. However, when we are young and have impressions left in our mind of disappointment, of, for example, deprivation. If you have been deprived as a youngster, you will tend to develop a worldview that is equivalent to that experience of deprivation. Same thing about the self-concept. You will indeed have a tendency to personalize the event and to have it and to accept the suggestion that you have something to do with your experience of deprivation. Of course, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds all do this quite a bit. As youngsters, we tend to personalize all our experiences. And as we get older, unfortunately, we do also, less so, hopefully. So, we're talking about the presence of emotional wounds. We may have been abandoned, may have been deserted. We may have endured deprivation of various kinds, deprivation of nurturance, deprivation of protection, deprivation of empathy from very important people like the love objects of our life, our mothers and our fathers. When we have disappointments with our parents, it is quite heartbreaking because it becomes an issue of love. And ultimately, this influences our loving, intimate relationships in the future. If we allow those representations to remain as they were when we were emotionally wounded, thank goodness we do evolve. New information does come in and we begin to change our symbols. However, some of us have been exposed to very unpleasant and intense circumstances. So these impressions are deeply rooted. They are resulting in perceptual distortions. We will jump to conclusions. We will overgeneralize. We will use feelings for facts. And our life is pretty wounded, and so we're left in with the question about how do I get out of this? I didn't get myself into it. However, it's up to me to get myself out of it. So, of course, Americans and the European culture has developed psychotherapy, an excellent tool, no doubt about it. A tool that is based on exposure. Exposure. In other words, psychotherapy tends to expose us to our emotional wounds, and in doing so, we have an opportunity to actually change them. We don't fear them anymore. We'll actually go in and investigate them, exposing us to the reality of the situation rather than the conception of the situation. These conceptions are the source of our suffering. These conceptions are also the limitations that we have in our experience. And we can open up. We can open up to new understandings through exposure. That means basically what we choose to expose ourselves to and how we operate with our minds, what we allow ourselves to become aware of. Well, mindfulness, meditation, has to do with the placement of our attention. It does result in exposures, fresh exposures that are not necessarily being driven by what we fear. In other words, fear of deprivation, fear of abandonment, fear that perhaps we are defective, fear that we may be subjugated. These apprehensive anxieties are coloring our worldview, and they become we function often in terms of them, and unfortunately we continue to remain trapped in them. For example, if you have an inferiority complex, that's a defectiveness schema. You have the idea something's wrong with you. It's not your idea. Your inner child developed that idea from evidence from his or her early experience.